What's something you can't believe you had to explain to another adult? That Jurassic Park wasn't a real place. I wish I was joking. Back when I was active duty Air Force, I had to explain to a woman I worked with why she should not mail fireworks to her husband. See, he was going to miss Independence Day because he was deployed in Iraq. Vitamin C and calcium are different. Co-worker of mine laughed when a customer told me he was English and said that's the language we speak. He means he's American. Seeing eye dogs are not also blind. That getting paid every 2 weeks doesn't mean you pay more in taxes than getting paid every week. That the engines on the plane we were flying in could not be turned off during the flight just because she thought they were too loud. That taking 2 B6 vitamins does not equal 1 B12 vitamin. That you cannot get pregnant from oral sex, and that it is necessary to empty the lint trap. Same person. That if you get married in Vegas it's legally binding everywhere. That someone can't give you AIDS by touching a door handle, and to not call the cops on this person because they have AIDS and touched a door handle. That Portugal isn't next to Brazil and then Spain isn't just south of the border. Once met a girl who thought there was a sun for every state. I used to work at hospital. One of the most frequent things I had to tell people was why it was a bad idea to smoke near their relatives or friends who had oxygen tanks. My boss once asked me what you're supposed to do with trash if you don't have a garbage disposal in your sink. Confused, I said, "You mean, like put it in a trash can?" He said, "Is that what it is?" Never seen someone that disconnected from reality. That thunder is not the result of clouds running into each other. Used to work in HR. Had to sit staff down in a mental health facility and explain to them they cannot flash their titties around with the patients. I wish I was joking. Duck. I hated my HR career. Everyone's a dumb duck. That you shouldn't try and get your toast out of the toaster with a conductive metal fork if your toast is stuck. And that when the fuses trip, you just got a visual indication of how close you came to death by electric shock. And that after explaining it once already, resetting the fuse box and watching the lights turn off 2 minutes later, I know you've done it again. Unplug the toaster before you jam metallic objects in it, you moron. Alcohol has calories. I had to be the one to tell my friend when she was in her mid-20s that the vodka she loved had calories. She was so shocked and said, "What? I thought since it was clear like water it didn't have any calories." I had to explain to my 32-year-old sister that dogs have a normal vision and not vision based on movement like a T-Rex in Jurassic Park. That there, in fact, wasn't a World War III. My wife's friend was visiting last winter and tagged along for a quick ski trip to our local mountain in the PNW. Was one of those perfect winter wonderland days with great snow cover and a light snow. While we were riding the lift up, the friend turns to me and asks how did they get the snow to look so perfect on the trees. She's 33 and she wasn't joking. That your 2-year-old needs an appointment for checkups. It's not a walk-in situation. They had been deciding when they wanted to go and just showing up then complaining because they weren't seen in a reasonable amount of time. She was 24. That Ireland is a real country and not just a made up place for leprechauns and 4-leaf clovers. That there's no such thing as the good mercury your body needs from eating fish. It's not named COVID-19 because there were 18 others before this. It was discovered in 2019 so they named it after the year. I worked in a factory once and a co-worker told me his parents would stop the car when they were younger to grab red dirt so that they could eat it. He explained that the dirt was what God had made people from and that your body craves the nutrients in red dirt. I had to tell him that he was eating clay and in fact it was not digestible. He didn't believe me. The Pope is Christian. My friend said the Pope wasn't Christian but Catholic. Took a genuinely long time to get across to her that Protestants and Catholics are both Christian. OMG, rip my inbox. Thanks for all the comments. The moon is not a second sun. I had to tell my husband today not to use a knife on the new non-stick pan I just purchased. That the US has never been at war with India and that Iran, Iraq and Afghanistan have nothing to do with India. He was in the military, which is the terrifying part. If getting a vasectomy is the same as what the vet did to his male cat, he was an engineer and I was the health insurance rep, I assured him that unlike his cat, he would still have his testicles. Explaining to my 14-year sister that I don't do drugs when she threw a full glass spice holder from my spice rack at me, nearly in tears. She asked how I could not only keep a jar of marijuana in my kitchen, but also label it, and I couldn't even spell it right, she cried. The spice was marjoram. We still tell the story of her devastation 8 years later. That an unconscious person can't consent to sex because they are unconscious. I had to explain this to an older colleague. It was a weird conversation. That it is not okay to eat a piece of the birthday cake before the surprise party. Wearing a mask during a pandemic comes to mind. How is there two diseases out at the same time? COVID-19 and Corona? Double quote. That you had to add dishwashing detergents to the dishwasher to actually wash the dishes. He thought detergent was to disinfect them. I guess that's one stroke too, right? This is a 40-year-old man who is a practicing lawyer. That a tornado is wind. This is in the context that I, as an insurance adjuster, had to explain to a client that tornado damage is in fact wind damage and isn't some sort of other creature that has nothing to do with wind. It's amazing how many people think chicken is not meat. There is no such thing as a legal requirement to register your hands, feet, any body part as a lethal weapon in the US, even if you are king of the badasses or your navy buddy carried a really shiny card indicating otherwise. That the plural of shelf is not shelves. That Sasquatch is not a type of fruit. That a bidet is not your sex drive. That a blank CD is not a CD writer. This was all the same guy. An ex of mine saw no need to wash a pan if he'd boiled, like, pasta or vegetables in it because it was also just water. He could not be convinced that the pan was now dirty with starch or vegetable matter. Essential oils are not miracle medicines that the doctors are hiding from the public. I used to manage a bookstore and I once had to tell a customer that we didn't have any historical reference books about dragons because dragons weren't real. This is embarrassing to even write, but I had to explain to a co-worker that her statement of some people treated their slaves well, so why not honor those people? You have no idea how those slaves were treated is not okay. Just plain not okay. Earlier this year, I had to explain to my sister that it's refrain not reframe. She genuinely thought that people would say things like refrain from touching me, in her own words. That way makes more sense because if I didn't want someone to touch me, I'd rather put a big frame around myself so they can't. She's 30 and a teacher. Other than this, she's very bright, honest, hahaha. NSFW. No one's going to believe me, but I had to explain to a woman exactly where her clit was. Even had to bust out a mirror. The reason is because her pleasure was derived from just above the clit, not the clit itself, so she naturally thought it was a little more north. That if you put something back in a different place than where you got it, you can't expect the other person to know where to find it later. That cheese and sauce come on the pizza and don't count toward your 3-topping coupon. Just in general, the number of people who were clearly adults who had zero idea how to order a pizza was mind-boggling. Hope this doesn't get buried, but a friend co-worker of mine, we're both EMTs, had to explain to someone today what an erection was. He called 911 because his D kept going up and down and he wanted to know if he should be concerned. Edit. The man was 22. I had to explain to my 26-year-old female co-worker that no, we actually don't pee out of our V's. I'm pretty sure she didn't believe me. I had to explain to an old co-worker that there are white people in Africa. She didn't believe me. Had a friend who thought fetish just meant you really liked something. She'd been going around telling people all the things she had fetishes for. Apparently, I was the first one to sit her down and explain the actual meaning of it to her. By then, the rest of our friend group genuinely believed that she had a fetish for Stranger Things. That when women wee, they don't wee all over their legs. Apparently when we sit down to wee, it goes all over our thighs. I was reviewing the alphabet, upper and lowercase, with my 5-year-old and my idiot Mill said I forgot there was a little lowercase, why she has a Y in her name. Well, I was the dumbest in this scenario. I asked my older sister a week ago how to fill out a check and turn it into an ATM. Yes, a 24-year-old dumbus, me, who finished college with a finance degree, had no idea on how to fill out a check use an ATM. Had to explain to my co-worker what social distancing was. When I brought it up, he looked at me like I had 3 heads. So many things surrounding sex, the female reproductive system, and general health. It's really quite alarming how little the American health education system actually educates kids. I had to explain to my GF, who's almost 30, that you have to replace the brakes and battery in your car periodically. The battery was especially weird, because she was like, my car is only 5 years old. And I was like, yeah, and you're lucky you got that many years out of one battery. That not everyone has a prostate, for example. That she, lacking a D or testicles, probably didn't have one, no matter how much she liked anal. That if I said no and a guy kissed me anyway, he didn't simply just misread my signals. Cows don't just produce milk all the time, they have to have been pregnant first. That everyone doesn't have the same opportunities in life. Why in 2014 Chris Farley hadn't made a new movie since the 90s. That Anne Frank was a real person and not fictional. I had to explain to a 35-year-old woman what blackface is, and then, less surprisingly, I had to explain to her why it is bad. Refrigerators already exist. She thought she was a genius for coming up with the idea of putting food into a cold space to reduce bacteria growth. That COVID-19 is not a conspiracy, and yes, you need to wear a mask.